Uh, Good afternoon and welcome to the Safe Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee. If we can move straight on to agenda item 1, which is the attendance. For webcasting purposes, I think it's important to outline the individual people who are present. So from my left we have Mrs. Leanne Scallett, Senior Corporate Improvement and Scrutiny Officers, Councillor Waite, Parish Burnett, Mr. Tim James and Dominic Redmond, the Democratic Services Officer. Are there any apologies for absence?
I've had apologies from Councillors Pamela Cameron, Brian Morby and Barry Taylor.
Thank you for that. If we can move on to agenda item 2, which is the declaration of interest. Can I bring in Mr. James, Assistant Legal Officer, in regard to any possible personal interest in respect of items on the agenda?
Thank you, Chair. No, I'm not aware of any potential declarations, so if members have got anything they want to ask me, could they now do so? And if there are any declarations, just remind members to record them in the register which goes round with the attendance register in the green folder. Okay. So, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
If we can move straight on to page number 5, which is agenda item number 3. This is the minutes of the last meeting. Members are reminded that the minutes relate to the previous item, which was performance of development control. If the committee can go through the minutes of the last meeting for both accuracy and confirmation purposes. So it's page number 5, 6, 7, 8, number 9, and the last page, number 10. Can I ask that a committee member moves that the minutes of the previous meeting are correct?
I move those, Chairman, as correct.
And could I have a show of hands, please? Thank you for that. Moving on to page number 11, which is agenda item number 4, which is the action sheet. I can confirm that there were no actions arising from the previous meeting. Can I have a show of hands to agree that this is the case? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Moving on to page number 13, agenda item 5, the summary of key decisions made during the period 16th of April 2015 to the 24th of June 2015. The purpose of the report is to inform the committee of executive decisions taken during the relevant period so that the committee has an opportunity to scrutinise and review these decisions. The suggested scrutiny activity itself, that the committee scrutinise and review the decisions taken during the relevant period as outlined in Appendix 1 and respond according to the options outlined in paragraph 4.3. If you quickly have a look at 4.3, we have the possibility of taking the decisions from 6 options. If we can go to page number 17, which is the decisions of the Cabinet. That's fine. Page 18, the decisions of the relevant executive member. Page 19, the key decisions taken by the relevant chief officer, and that extends to page 20 as well. If committee members are happy, can I ask a committee member to move the committee notes, the contents of the summary of executive decisions? And show of hands? That's an agreement. Thank you. Moving on to page number 21, which is agenda item 6. The update, report, progress and impact of accepted recommendations. Again, the purpose of the report is to provide members with an update on the progress made implementing scrutiny recommendations previously accepted or to be considered by the relevant executive member. The committee are invited to review the impact of recommendations accepted and implemented by the executive member relating to completed scrutiny activity by scrutinising the impact, timescales and progress details in the Safer Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee recommendation update attached as Appendix 1 to the report. If we can go through the report again, could committee members indicate on what recommendation they would like to receive for the information from the appropriate officer. We're now currently on page number 25 to number 26.
Chairman, could I just bring one thing up on the very first one?
If I can call Kim in, because I think it relates to the Environmental Enforcement Department, that's fine.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. It's regarding members were keen to continue dog fouling, litter that Kingdom were employed by us to do, and of course we couldn't renew the contract. In the light of yesterday's cabinet and the council are going to collaborate with Blaenau Gwent, does Blaenau Gwent still hold a contract with these people? Because I was thinking if they did, could we collaborate in some way?
Blaenau Gwent do still hold a contract with Kingdom. They pay for the service from Kingdom, but it's something we will explore as part of the bigger collaboration. I know that Blaenau Gwent do have some difficulties in the amount of fines that Kingdom are able to process, which pays for part of their service. So expanding it over the two areas may help balance that out. So we will explore them as soon as possible with Blaenau Gwent.
That's really good to hear, Chairman, because, members were keen to have this, but of course it's not officers' fault for this. We know what the situation is, and it's out of your control, really. Only I thought, if we were going to collaborate with Blaenau Gwent, that was an opportunity for us. Thank you.
Councillor Bennett.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just in all of this, given the last time Kingdom were doing it, absolute waste of time, as we know. Didn't prove anything whatsoever. I mean, every member was complaining about dog fowl in their wards. I still have the records from how many months it was. I would say 80%, maybe 85% of them, were all from private properties. Asda car parks, Morrison's car parks, Tesco car parks. Very little from what we call in our residence areas. So how on earth is it ever going to work? I just can't see it, Kim. We're just going to be throwing money away again, employing people to police private properties. That's all we did the last time. And I just not in agreement with this whatsoever, unless we come up with something fundamental that we're going to start looking in our wards, not private properties as they did last time. And I've still got the records. I mean, they sit there and wait and pounce. And I don't want to see that again.
I note your comments, and the comment from Cabinet was that they were happy with the scheme, the same as the scrutiny's view was they were happy with the scheme. However, the thought of additional cost, well, a cost, we weren't paying anything at the time, meant that the scheme stopped. Unfortunately, we re-tendered as asked by this committee, and there were no applicants at all. I have had another company approach me since, suggesting that they will be able to do it, but they have looked at the figures that we had with Kingdom, even though Kingdom were focusing on high footfall areas, and they've then turned around and said it's not economic for them to do either. Unless it concentrates on high footfall areas, it's never going to be economic. So unless the council is going to actually pay for a whole service where we can direct exactly where it goes, it is always going to be an issue, and I fully accept that.
If this company said they can only concentrate on high footfall, what's the point? What's the point of the scheme? Can you give me a point to why we should even look at it when they're only going to be high footfalls, not in our wards where we need them? I mean, there was, well, I mean, I should have brought the records with me. I mean, one here and one there, dog fouling, practically zero in some areas. Yeah, there's plenty of dog fouling there, down parks or whatever. I just don't see the point. If they're going to concentrate on high footfall areas where we call private, we shouldn't be policing Asda car parks, Morrison's car parks, Tesco car parks. We should be policing our streets.
With dog fouling, I know I brought this up at great length during the initial report. It's not very easy to deal with dog fouling, even if we patrolled only parks and places where dog walkers are, because you have to actually witness the dog defecating and then witness the owner not picking up. It makes it very difficult to enforce. It's also a high cost because most of the dog walkers are out not within normal council times, so we were having to pay overtime for people to be either end and things like that. And whether it's the most appropriate way of policing dog fouling, I don't know, but I don't know of another way to do it other than have people permanently walking parks, and we haven't got the staff resources to even consider that.
So what is the point of the scheme? I mean, why are we, and I haven't been answered yet, why are we patrolling private properties and not ours? That's all we ever do, is patrol private properties, car parks, and that's all they get the money from.
At the moment, we're not patrolling anything. So I think that it's a question. If the scheme comes back in, we can see what parameters we can use for it. However, a lot of people did actually thank us when the scheme was in place. They appreciated the fact that there was something there, even if it wasn't totally satisfactory. I think it did also get the message out that an awful lot of the litter is from cigarette ends and things like that. And it's litter. It's not just a cigarette on the floor, a cigarette end on the floor, it is litter. So I think it did get that message out, which did help.
I think they're the general concern from all committee members and councillors in regarding the actual project. If it continues in the future, and from what I'm gathering there might be an interested party, then obviously we've got to review it again, if you like, from the grassroots, if you like, in regarding not only the management of it, but the operational side of it as well. I dare say that lessons will have to be learned at the end of the day, but then obviously we've got to have a look at the best practice, if you like, to ensure that whatever scheme comes in is going to be beneficial to the whole of the council.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, is when this scheme came in last time. I was chair of this committee then, and with all members, they were all for it because of dog fouling, and that was the initial implementation of it to prevent dog fouling. And it just didn't work because we didn't catch them. So before we implement anything ever again, what basis we're going to set it on? Is it for dog fouling or stopping litter in private areas, which they should be policed by their own people in the town centre? Town centre is clean 3 or 4 times a day. What are we doing walking around there? What are we doing walking around there? Stopping people, chucking a chewing gum paper down. Shouldn't be there.
I take on board what you said, but I think that's for a future debate at the end of the day and not necessarily for around this particular table. If we can move on to page number 26, Kim, and it's number 3, which says Cumbrian Town Centre, Bonavon, Melin should also be approached to explore whether they would be able to offer financial assistance towards a future scheme. Are we able to continue to pursue Cumbrian Town Centre and Bonavon and Melin to explore whether we would be able to offer, they would be able to offer any financial assistance, even though we haven't pursued that?
We haven't pursued it at the moment because of the unsuccessful tender process. I don't have the capacity to run a scheme myself in-house, so it would have to be through a firm like Kingdom actually issuing the first fixed penalty notices. So we haven't even contacted them, I'm sorry.
If I could, would we ask whether they would be interested, even if it's in principle?
I haven't contacted them at all as yet. If the committee wish me to contact them, I can contact them, but I don't know how a scheme would operate without what our involvement would be in it. But I can ask them in principle if they would.
I would appreciate that, certainly. Pages 27 to 28, which is in the performance of development control, 27. (28). 29, which is housing self-evaluation and the pilot. And 30. I think that concludes. Can I ask that committee members move that the committee note the contents of the updated report? Okay. And could I thank officers or Elke for coming along, even though it was only brief. Thank you. If we can move on to page number 31, which is the agenda item 7, the overview and scrutiny report. If we can have a look at the suggested scrutiny activity is as follows. The Safer Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committees are asked to note the key findings and recommendations of the Audit General's report, review and scrutinise to what extent suitable arrangements are in place within the Council to address the recommendations made, make appropriate recommendations to the relevant executive member and or chief officer where arrangements need to be strengthened, if required, ensure appropriate arrangements within the committee works programme are put in place to monitor progress and address the recommendations that have been made. Okay. I'd like to make a statement here in regarding the Welsh Audit Office. In order to ask questions in relationship to the Welsh Audit report, committee members were invited to take part in a conference call. However, there was not enough members available to warrant the call to take place until it did not happen. The Wales Audit Office were also invited to attend today's meeting. However, due to other commitments, they were unable to do so. However, they did suggest that should committee members have any questions they would like the Welsh Audit Office to answer, then they could be forwarded for a question, for the questions onto them for a reply. 7 questions were sent. to the Welsh Audit Office on behalf of the committee, from which the Welsh Audit Office gave 7 answers, which have been distributed to members. Obviously, the Welsh Audit Office aren't here at the moment, so in view of the fact that the Welsh Audit Office are not present today, can I ask that the committee members move that the committee note the contents of the Welsh Audit Office replies to the committee questions? You happy with that?
Yes.
Anna Hans? Thank you, members. If I could bring Kim down. Oh, you're already down. All right. I should have introduced yourself. I do beg your pardon, Kim. Kim Pugh is the head of public protection and the report writer. And in the background we have Duncan Smith, who's the Chief Officer, Planning and Public Protection Service. Welcome. If you could provide us with a brief outline of the submitted report, and if there is any additional or updated information which needs to be brought to the committee's attention, then obviously this is the time to, if you'd like to do it. Obviously the report starts on page number 33.
In summary, the Welsh Audit Office reported that Torfaen is generally delivering environmental health services at above minimum levels, despite cutting expenditure. Staff numbers have marginally increased. Stakeholders have mixed views on the management of services, and it's felt that the Council would find it difficult taking on new statutory duties that protect the public and the environment. It's the sort of headline figure from the report. However, I would point out several things. That the questioning to do with this report took place in November 2013 and was finished in April 2014. The report wasn't published until October 2014, so it's a long gap before we actually found out what was required to actually put things right. It was part of an All Wales report, so some of the questioning may not relate directly towards Torfaen, because we don't provide those services within Environmental Health Department. Housing particularly, they had quite that best practice standards include all of housing, whereas we only cover the enforcement part of housing. So there are bits out. Licensing was actually in, even though it's one of the departments that sits under mine, but not under environmental health really. So that was included in the report. And some of the responses they had particularly from members and from members of the public, were very small. So the comments in the Torfaen report are the general All Wales responses, so they may not fully reflect what happens in Torfaen. And some of the recommendations that were made by the report are not really solely down to environmental health, particularly environmental health in Torfaen, to put right. So some of them are being addressed as on an all Wales basis. I belong to a group which is called the Wales Heads of Environmental Health Group, currently known as just WOEG, because it's such a mouthful to us to say the rest of the time. And we are actually addressing those recommendations which relate across Wales as a whole group, rather than all doing them separately. And I'll go through the recommendations in turn, if I may, one by one, because the specifics in the recommendations were set out by the Wales Audit Office, and I have put a note in the report, this starts on page 35, about each of those recommendations, rather than just write the action plan out. There are comments through the report. Recommendation 1 was that we align the work of environmental health with the national strategic priorities, identify the wider contribution in delivering the Welsh Government priorities, and identify the benefit and impact of environmental health services on protecting citizens. And what we've done here is, through the Wales Heads of Environmental Health Group, we've produced the infograms which are shown behind you. I think one has come down, behind you, Leanne. These relate to what are the Wales national priorities. The large one in the centre behind Councillor Kemp details the Wales priorities around the outside, and then has the feed-in from the different sections of environmental health to what we actually contribute to those. The smaller ones around the outside then link to specific service areas and have looked at how we actually contribute to the headline figures again. Some of them are obvious, food, health and safety, food hygiene and safety. We do an awful lot there to contribute to people's health, well-being and things like that. Others may be less obvious because, as the heading says, environmental health is almost an unseen service. We are an essential service, I would say, when you look at the breadth of work that we cover, and we only cost about 3% of the council's budget. So it is a highly cost-effective service which does deliver to the wider health determinants. And these infograms were set up jointly by Wales Health, heads of environmental health, so that we could use them to actually promote our services, really, and make people more aware of what they are and what their effects are. So this is the first time I've brought them out since they were done. I thought this scrutiny was an ideal place to sort of launch them, but I was intending to put them up in the members' room maybe later. And if there are any public events where it's of interest, if it's like about the budget cutting and budget savings and things like that, that they will help people to understand what we deliver. Because we are a service who suffers a bit from, if the switchboard don't know where to put a call, it's probably environmental health. So we get an awful lot that's not us, because we do cover such a wide breadth of things that people aren't aware of what that impact may be. So I'd actually commend them to you. They'll be up the rest of the afternoon to take a look. And obviously, if you've got any comments on whether you think they're effective or not, I'd like to hear. Thank you.
With the fact that you suggested them going into the members' room as well, would there be supporting literature to explain exactly what they are for members?
I could put a brief thing in that it was part of the audit report that we actually met that recommendation, and that was the reason they were developed, if you think that would help.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you. If we can... So, sorry. Have you finished? Keep myself by that.
I finished on recommendation 1.
Right,
yes.
That's fine.
Would you like me to look at the action plan for recommendation 1 after recommendation 1, or get to the end and look at the action plan in total?
Yes.
Okay. Recommendation 2 was to provide scrutiny chairs and members with the necessary skills and support to effectively scrutinise and challenge service performance saving plans and the impact of budget reductions. The delivery of this really isn't to do with environmental health, it's the process of scrutiny in total. And I know that you do receive, through scrutiny, through member training and things like that, information about the scrutiny process, and if there are particular difficult decisions coming up, there are training seminars held for members to take that forward. So I think, in my opinion, that is sort of met already as an ongoing process within the corporate centre. But it's obviously for you to think whether that's effective or not. Recommendation 3 was to improve engagement with local residents over planned budget cuts by consulting with residents over planned changes, outlining which services are to be cut and how the cuts will impact on residents, and setting out plans for increasing charges or changing that should be the standard of service. So, because we may decide to actually, we'd still do food inspections, but we won't do all of the food inspections. We'll limit them to high risk. Could be a way that we cut services. In answer to this, I would say that consultation has been undertaken by environmental health when we're introducing new legislation or new enforcement. Particular areas I'd like to bring to your attention are the dog control areas. That was widely consulted on through using My Say and some social media as well, I believe, and also through local dog walker groups that we knew were people with specific interest in it. And we took into account every response when we finalised the areas concerned. And in the case of the dog control orders, we actually altered some of the outlined areas in response to what people had said. There were things that we hadn't realised, like this is only a marked pitch for the cricket season, apart from the wicket. So in the winter, can it be the whole area, and only in the summer months have the wider circle? And we took those all into account to get those there. Licensing, for those of you who are on the licensing committee, sorry, this will be very familiar to you. They're currently consulting on the new licensing policy. That goes out to all members of the trade so that they can have their say. We don't often, though, look at members of the public. We're actually going to the people who are most directly affected, because the licensing policy actually says how we actually will deliver taxi licensing, for example. So it goes to all the taxi drivers. So we do attempt to get the view of our major stakeholders. I think the only thing I would say that we don't do is that we are a statutory service, and some of the things we are going to be doing whether people like it or not, because that's our duty. Some of the things, if it's new legislation coming in, there is very little point in us following up a national consultation with a local one when we have to do it anyway. So it does limit when you can, but we do try and consult wherever we can. Sorry. Recommendation 4 is quite a long one, actually. Improving efficiency and value for money by identifying statutory and non-statutory duties, agreeing environmental health priorities for the future and the role of the Council in delivering these, determining acceptable standard of performance and publicise these to citizens, improve efficiency and maintain a performance at the agreed level through collaborating or integrating with others, reduce costs, all that. Using grants strategically to maximise impact and return, and reducing activities to focus on core statutory and strategic priorities. I would have to say that we're a long way down this road already. We're a very small service. We've not been protected. Our budget has been cut bit by bit over the years, and it has resulted in this coming back to focusing on what are our core statutory functions. Most of what we do are statutory. What can be decided, and I would be asking scrutiny to look at this at some time in the future, is what level we actually deliver those at. I mentioned food inspections before. It's an easy one to get your head around, really. Food businesses are ranked as being high risk, medium risk, low risk. At the moment, we are inspecting all of our high risk, most of our medium risk, very few of our low risk. It may be that rather than cut another part of the service, members would rather we only focus on high-risk food inspections and dropped medium ones as well.
How do you define high, medium and low? Is the record of the food premises, is it?
The businesses are categorised in those headings following an inspection. They get rated against the criteria that are set down by the Food Standards Agency, and that gives them a score which says where they fit. There's another scoring system that you may be aware of as well, the Food Hygiene Rating System, which again links very much to those scores, in that 4s and 5s are above what's required of a business. They would be maybe high risk because of what they do, in that they may be a food manufacturer, but they'd be low risk, a lower risk to us, even though we would have to inspect them still, because they are high performing. But it's all based on the risk they pose, not how they perform. On the stars, you're rating, this is their actual performance. Their rating as a business is on what they actually do. So if they're a manufacturer, they will be high. If they're a pub with food, they will be high or medium, depending on volume of traffic and their past history and their past compliance. If they're a corner shop, they're likely to be the low end until something happens and they have to be moved up and down. One of the exceptions to what we do that is non-statutory, pest control is non-statutory. So the council could choose not to have a pest control service at all, if it wished. I personally think it may be a step too far. I was worried last year about introducing charges for pest control and what effect that would have. Lots of councils now around Wales are actually looking at not having a pest control service, because it's one area that it's discretionary whether we have it or not. Another area, which at the moment is non-statutory, but that may change with the introduction of the Public Health Bill, is the control of tattooing and body piercing type activities, which this authority has chosen to adopt. We actually went through the process to adopt that so that we could enforce in those areas. And I would say at the moment, we have done several prosecutions about tattooing. It's a high risk area. It's often done in uncontrolled places, and I would really not want to see that dropped, but actually it would be covered in the Public Health Bill anyway. If I could just explain that in the next paragraph, I've tried to explain why if we drop pest control, it's very difficult to actually identify a major saving. I think that it's hard to actually get it on in a sentence that makes proper sense on paper. We employ 2 staff to do pest control, some dog warden duties, and they do some dog patrolling, dog fouling patrolling if they get the opportunity. Pest control is not a statutory service, so we could drop it. However, the dog warden service is a statutory service. So if we were dropping it, we're making a decision that we're not going to actually enforce statutory provision. But if I'm providing a dog warden service, I actually need 2 people and the 2 vans that they come in. So that's the bulk of the cost of the pest control service anyway. So it's not actually producing a huge saving. It would be the saving on not having to buy chemicals and as much protective equipment. So it's very difficult while we're on our own to make a saving. However, there could be some savings when we work in collaboration.
If we didn't or drop pest control, are there enough businesses out there to take up the reins, if you like, that we've dropped, if you like, because obviously we've got to ensure that pests are eradicated, if you like, and in addition, if you like, even though we might not necessarily, because it's not statutory, have we considered putting in a charge?
We do charge. We introduced charging from April last year. Initially, the charge is £30 plus VAT. Initially, the charge resulted in a significant drop in the requests for service. We only deal with what I call public health pests: rats, mice, cockroaches, bedbugs. The demand for service dropped off the edge when we introduced the charge. It's now picking back up as people realise that actually we are a lot cheaper than some of our competitors. But I have no doubt if we weren't here doing it, other firms would step in, but they may be at a higher cost.
Thank you, Chair. I could be honest, I was one of the best ones for calling out pest control because Jackie or Jason's come up because we feed the birds, and like Jason say, feed the birds, feed the rats. We're not stopping feeding the birds, that was it. But now they've stopped, but I mean, I used to call them regular. But what the people that don't do it themselves now, the increase of the rat population, and we say a lot of councils don't have a pest control. I mean, we see on the television in London, it's just blows out the water how many rats are about. So can you see, Kim, the rat population increasing within this area? I know you need 6 feet away from a rat, but through food outlets and places like that. I mean, we've had them this week. I think is the end of him because he takes the bait, but we do control our own. But there's lots of people wouldn't buy any control at all, and it's going to increase. Neighbours of mine say, "Oh, you put the poison?" I go, "Yes, as usual." You know what I mean? So they leave it to me. But we do control, because we feed the birds, we control our own pests. But there must be lots of people that don't. So what do you see the future of increasing with the pests?
I think there's going to undoubtedly be an increase anyway, regardless of whether we offered a free pest control service or not. The weather conditions last winter were very conducive for them to breed and not lose numbers through the winter. It was a very mild winter overall. No prolonged cold spell to force any changes. And the forecast I read on the weekend for the next 20-odd years is of increasing warm summers and less cold winters, which will help rat populations totally. To counter that, we are looking to do some proper targeted sewer baiting, which we do on behalf of Welsh Water Do Cymru, to actually target areas where we know we've got a problem with rats in public places as opposed to gardens, in street areas, on roundabouts, things like that. So we will target those, and areas where we have a row of houses which are all affected by pests. We will look to bait the sewer in that area to actually get a hold on the whole problem rather than treating one or two bits.
We talk about working in collaboration. I mean, we have Melin, Sarah, we've all got all these housing people. Do they have the working collaboration with you? Because they own lots of properties now and lots of open spaces. I mean, how do they deal with it, Kim?
We actually have a contract with Melin to bait houses on their behalf. And we're pursuing Bronavon at the moment to see if we can make the same arrangements with Bronavon. With regard to the main arrangements we have with them, if our pest control officers go to a property and find there are points of access for pests, they then liaise direct with Bronavon or Melin to get those repairs done and put in place, rather than the tenant have to go back and explain, maybe not that clearly, what needs to be done. Our pest control officers contact them direct to get any necessary repairs done.
Could I just ask, Kim, with the services, we call it pest control, but other people wouldn't call it pest control, is the bees and the bees' nests. They seem to lodge in people's attics and different places, and do we actually do anything with that?
No, we don't do anything. Bees and wasps, we used to deal with wasps. Bees, we have never treated bees. What we normally do with bees, if somebody phones up and says they've got a problem with bees, we refer them to the British Beekeepers Association. They have people who are quite happy to come, if they're accessible, to pick up a swarm. So we would use them. But we refer people to the information that they put out and access them in that way.
Kim, what I intend to do is as you go through the recommendations page by page, there are some set questions, and so in order to move things along, if members can have a look at the set questions as well, and then we can do it at the same time. Thank you.
We do, when we assess what the environmental health priorities are, I do consider what our own council's priorities are through the corporate plan. I also consider the Wales government priorities, which are on the wall behind you. We also have national enforcement priorities, which were agreed with Welsh Government, which I consider how that fits in. And also, even if we haven't planned for them, ad hoc priorities come up locally, particular problems in particular areas. There may be some areas of housing that we particularly want to focus on because we've identified a problem in those areas. They may be areas that members have brought to our attention. and those are all considered when we're planning what our team performance is going to be, you know, what we're aiming to do for the next year. I think there are some considerable overlaps between all of them, both the national priorities, local ones, but some of the things that come up sort of through the year may be circumstances, and that has to become the priority. Last year we had a major problem with Easy Bake. As you know, we went to court. That overtakes all the priorities in the plan because it's an urgent action that we have to do. Other things may be less urgent but have come to our attention. We're currently doing a lot about waste production, trade waste production in Bronavon. In Blanavon, because there was a particular problem identified there with people putting out trade waste with household rubbish, or putting trade waste out all through the week, and it was making the high street look really messy. So because that was identified, we've then introduced fixed penalty notices for people who don't make proper arrangements for their trade waste. And we will be targeting areas throughout the borough as they come up, where there are particular problems. So priorities are set in different ways, but trying to take into account all the overarching things that we're aware of.
I know you've mentioned the WHOEHG, I'm not going to say it. Maybe this is the appropriate time to ask question 5. How are the WHOEHG going to align the work of environmental health with national and local priorities?
Well, part of the work was the infograms behind you, in that what we've actually looked at is the things that we traditionally do, the headline things we traditionally do, where they actually contribute to the national priorities. What would be happening if there are budget cuts? We would need to look at which ones of those are more important to members than others, really. They all do contribute in some way. They are all important. Some of them may be less important most of the time, like infectious disease control is something that we're not doing at a high level all the time. But if you have an outbreak like we had in Green Meadow Farm, it's the only thing you're doing, so it changes everything.
With that in my mind, would you say that council local priorities will become secondary against the national priorities?
No. Local priorities reflect the area and the locality we're in. We have specific problems here in Torfaen which will not be the same as those in Monmouth. They won't be the same as those in Newport because of the type of housing we've got, because of the different, well, even the north of the borough has got different problem areas to the south, because of the different feel for them. So I think the local ones will always be at the forefront, but some of the things that we do routinely do play into both the corporate priorities and the national ones, because food inspections is on all of them. It's not a particular problem for us locally here in Torfaen. The businesses are generally very good. They're about 90% totally compliant.
And so from, would you say that the local, the local priorities will take precedent over the national ones, and in doing so, what I'm concerned about is if we concentrate on the nationals, will Torfaen residents receive a lesser service due to the national priorities?
I think you'll find in effect that most of the local priorities, although they're focused on specific areas because there are specific problems, will be the same. They will have the same impact, so I don't have any problem with juggling them around. If we wanted to say our local priority is that we want lots of people out there doing enforcement about dog fouling, I'd have to say that would then take the resource and we wouldn't be able to fulfil our other functions. But that would be a decision for members, really, where the priorities lie for the whole council. Certainly, we also, in environmental health, are a very reactive service. And last year we dealt with, I think it was 2,600 requests for service within public health, just one area of environmental health, and we respond to every one of those. So it's very reactive to what the members of public are bringing to us. We respond to all of them. Going forward, we do consider all areas of work to see whether they could be done better in collaboration, whether there's an easy win, whether there's some, whether outsourcing would actually make the work cheaper or more effective. We considered that certainly before we introduced the charges for pest control. Was it better for us to charge for our service, or was it better to pay somebody else to deliver a service on our behalf? Or would someone else do it on a contract where they would do all the baiting, collecting, and we would just be the referral agency? And actually, because of the need for the vans and the people, it doesn't allow us much of a leeway to make savings on that ground. But it is considered at every opportunity whether, why are we always doing it the way we did it before? Is there another way to do it? Because we're conscious that that's the only way we can really now make cuts. A huge portion of our budget is staff costs. We have very little budget for spending on general goods and services, sort of thing. So we have to really consider all the time is if we've only got these 4 people doing this bit of work, which is the best way to do it? And are they the most appropriate people to do it? Should we be looking at paying somebody else to do it for us? So we are considering it all the time.
Are the local authorities still considering coming in with ourselves, if you like, and because there was a seminar a couple of weeks ago in which some authorities, because of the current state of play regarding the boundaries, etc., they weren't willing to come in.
I actually took a report to Cabinet this week. We were looking at a large collaboration for trading standards with the whole of Gwent, but that's fallen through because of finances, really. Some authorities concerned that they were contributing more than what was their fair share almost to the agreement. I'm also in the position, we're following the sad death of Steve Whitehouse, that I haven't got a trading standards manager at present, and I'm managing that section. While I can manage them as a section, if they bring in like a court case to me, I can decide whether it's acceptable, we've got enough evidence and things. What I don't have the expertise to do is to know whether I've got the right offences down on the paper, because I'm not that familiar with trading standards legislation. So we started talking to Blaenau Gwent on, they're a very small section as well, and we're looking at having a collaboration with them for trading standards to start off with, where we share their manager and work as a joint team, so that we get a little bit of resilience, a bit of capacity. We'll have the capacity to undertake, if we're doing a large investigation, at the moment my trading standards team has to borrow people from everywhere, you know, the environmental health team go and do it, Newport come and help and all like that. So we're looking at trading standards being the start, to be followed by licensing, to be followed by environmental health in an incremental stage, because we just are too small to cover all the areas on our own, whereas other sections may have expertise in a particular area, which helps us because we can use that expertise. It also provides cover for specialist functions. Like we have one person with weights and measures capabilities, competencies within Torfaen. There is only one person with that in Blaenau Gwent. Well, it does mean then that if one's on holiday or off ill, you've got cover for those things. So the report went to Cabinet on Tuesday this week, so it's there if members want to read. It's an agreement in principle for us to go ahead, and we're hoping it's going to be more of a less formal collaboration, but more of a get on and get stuff done collaboration. They also bring up in here about the use of grants. There aren't many grants available to support routine environmental health services, because that's regarded as being one of the council's core functions. So there are not a huge amount of grants you can apply for. They do put out grants regularly from the Food Standards Agency for specific sampling. They did grants for sampling following the horse meat scandal, things like that. We take advantage of all the ones that we possibly can. But a lot of them have been food related because the Food Standards Agency has funding to give grants. Anything that comes up from Welsh Government grants is normally linked to new legislation, and as WOHEG, the group, are actually pointing out to Welsh Government every time new legislation comes out, the cost to us of actually enforcing that, and the fact that there isn't spare capacity within local authorities now to take on extra legislation without there being an increase in funding available to actually get the extra staff needed to do it. And that's going to be the issue with both the housing, changes to the Housing Act, and also the Public Health Bill, which is coming in shortly.
Do we know if there's going to be any grant for the Public Health Bill as yet? Because obviously there is for the housing, and that was one of the questions in regarding if there's no funding for the Public Health Bill, what financial implications could arise because we're not having the funding?
For the Public Health Bill, I know that Chris Brereton, who is the Chief Environmental Health Officer for Welsh Government, is well aware of the difficulties that local authorities are facing, and they are exploring what is the cost to local authorities of the new legislation, and that would probably be made available as a grant. But the amounts aren't known yet, but there will be some funding available. With that funding, it's normally the case that in Torfaen, if it's actually a grant to me in the first year, but then comes in the general settlement the second year, I do normally still end up with that money. So it's good that I do. It is actually accepted that it was additional money because it was additional function. So I'm not as badly off as some other councils. But the Public Health Act, a lot of it is relating to two in, which we're actually doing some of the work, but it actually does have a requirement for annual inspections, which at the moment we're not carrying out. So there would be some costs to the authority. But I think it's great if they're actually saying that everybody who does any tattooing or piercing or any of the special procedures they're being called, so we can add more to the list, that they do it properly and safely. And I'm quite in favour of the fact that they are actually formalising an inspection regime for them, because not every council has adopted the bylaws and everything to take forward any enforcement, whereas we currently are. So we'll be in a better position than most to take that forward. Recommendation 5 was to improve strategic planning by identifying, collecting, analysing financial performance, demand data on environmental health services, analysing collected data to inform and understand the relationship between cost-benefit impact and use it to underpin decisions on the future of council environmental health services, and agree how digital information can be used to plan and develop environmental health services in the future. I have to say we are using these sort of processes when we're looking at planning our budget anyway. You don't do it in a vacuum. We have actually recently completed a self-evaluation as part of the corporate process for looking at what is delivered, where and at what cost. And I'm hoping that that will help play into the budget preparation, and also it will help into our linking to our performance data and how much it costs us to deliver those services.
One of our questions is what processes have been introduced corporately in regard to recommendation number 5 of the Welsh Audit Office report?
We have all had to undergo a self-evaluation process, looking at what we deliver, what does it cost, what's the impact if we stop delivering it, and what are the risks to the council, whether they're reputational or whatever. So that's an ongoing process, which is, it's a pilot scheme at the moment that's being done corporately. Every department, I think, has in the council has been part of it, and they're now looking at what the outcomes of that are. I know as well at the moment PricewaterhouseCoopers are actually in looking at questions like, can we deliver this service in a different way? Is there a better way to do it? Has outsourcing been properly considered? Things like that. So I think the two things together will help make that process more robust than it was. The last part of that one, how digital information can be used. We do actually try to do as much as we can electronically. All our records are held electronically, our work plans are developed electronically, things like that. We have signed up to a framework agreement in principle, which is looking at developing a whole Wales, an all Wales system for environmental health and public protection services. So it would be a shared database where it's cloud-based, it's easy to access from wherever you are. If there were any mergers of authorities, which, as we know, is going to happen, but we just don't know with who and when, it would be easy to link services because we're using the same database. You just increase access across them instead of having to merge things. All we've done at the moment is we signed up at the start of the process to say we would be interested in being part of the framework. We now have to sit down and make decisions as to whether the costs are appropriate for us and whether it's a system that is fine. That we've organised a demonstration, which is in the action plan, of Tascomi as the system in question. It looks very good, it looks easy to use. There are already 6 councils who wish to be early adopters. So my view is that we will see how they get on in developing the system, but it is there and we can, any time within 5 years, sign up to it without having to go through another tendering process, if we think it's the one for us. Which would, anything that can make the staff's job easier when you're out and about and make recording what you've done easier, it's got to be good. We were looking at our food inspections, and actually you spend as much time in the office after the inspection as you do actually in the business with the business, because they have to be rated, letters have to be generated and things like that. We've done as much as we can to standardise paragraphs in letters, to make it easier to pull things together. But you still have to have a searchable database that you can actually get information out of. The one we're using now is fine, but to upgrade to what that system is now would also cost us quite a considerable sum of money. So it's whether it's for us the best time do we want to change, or actually would we be better off be spending on an existing system, but at least have the up-to-date version. And recommendation 6, it actually says in the report, the response is required from Welsh Government and the WLGA, which is the recommendation is that it clearly sets out the expectations of council environmental health services under new housing and health legislation, and agree how these new duties will be delivered. I think the agreement of who will deliver them has been made, and how will be developed as the legislation is developed. But I just wanted to point out to members that we have discussed funding for local authorities to cover the cost of enforcing the new legislation in both those cases. It's all covered. Do you want to take the questions next?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think if it's okay with members, if we can go back to page number 34. I know at this present time I seem to be asking an awful lot of the questions, but I know that other councillors are going to be asking questions as well, so I'm not too worried about that in the long term. If we can have a look at page 34 and section 5.1. In your opinion, why do you think stakeholders have mixed views in regard to the management of services?
I think part of the problem here is that there weren't very many responses from stakeholders on an all-Wales basis. So the results haven't been drilled down onto a Torfaen basis with regard to stakeholders. I think as a section, and it's a perpetual complaint, we're very good at doing the job, but we're not very good at shouting about it afterwards. So I don't think all the time stakeholders actually know what environmental health does in total. They may have seen programmes on the television and know we deal with people who hoard things in houses, or they may have seen this out with pest control, but they don't know that one section does all of that. And I think we need to get better at actually getting the message out there, not just what we do, but how it contributes to the bigger picture. And hopefully these sort of things will be the start of making a more focused effort on that.
Question 2 is again in 34, the first bullet point. If national strategic priorities are not met, what will be the impact on the council and local residents across Torfaen?
I'm sorry, I can't. The first bullet point?
Under 5.1.
Councils have many statutory that's
yes. If national strategic priorities are not met, because it says councils have national statutory environmental health duties, but spending is not being protected during the current period for financial austerity. What is making it more difficult to deliver national strategic priorities? And the question again was, if national strategic priorities are not met, what will be the impact on the council and local residents across Torfaen?
The impact on local residents would be that they're not protected by the new legislation coming in. If we were unable to enforce, for example, the Housing Act legislation properly, our landlords wouldn't be registered. They wouldn't have the protections of knowing that the landlords were fit and proper people, that they'd undergone training, things like that. So that could have very severe effects on residents of Torfaen. But I'm confident that that wouldn't be the case, because I think that if we have to then say this is the very small pot we've got, we have to decide where to spend it, I think anybody's priorities would come down as being the ones that are the key priorities, and it would be other lesser things that get dropped. If you look at the way our services are now, over the years, because we've had to cut back, we are focusing on our statutory duties. We don't do as much health promotion. We don't do as much out there just doing the niceties, really, of giving advice to schools, talks to schools, things like that, because we haven't got the staff. In an ideal world, it would be great to be able to do those still, because I thought they were very beneficial. But we've had to cut back to what we can actually deliver. And I think it may come to questions of which of these things do members want us to deliver. And we'd have to consider on each one what the implications are for Torfaen in particular for those. But I think that we still have currently enough resources to deliver the key things.
I know you mentioned about the private landlords, and that introduced me into the next question, which is under 5.3. And it states the Housing Act introduces a requirement for all private sector landlords and letting agents to be registered. Failure to register is an offence, and enforcement of this legislation will fall to local authorities. How are you going to do this? And basically, what percentage of private sector landlords are currently accredited?
I don't know I can't give an accurate figure actually for what percentage, because we're very aware that we don't know all the private sector landlords within Torfaen. There are an awful lot of people who have one house. They don't come on the radar until a tenant complains about something in their house. We have some people who are almost accidental landlords. They've been left a house, market's not very good, they can't sell it at the moment, so they decide to rent it out. We don't get to see those at all until something goes wrong and we get a complaint. At the other end of the scale, we've got some landlords who have 70 plus properties. It's their business, and they are approaching it as a business. I know that we have details of about, and if you want the exact figures, I can send them round, because I'd have to look them up. There's around between 280 to 300 landlords that we're aware of, and there are probably a third of that number, around 90, are accredited at the moment. Actually, there's a course on today, so there'll be more after today, as long as they pass the test at the end. There's an actual course being run today for accreditation. We have promoted the courses through the Landlords Forum and any landlords we come across who haven't been through that process, to try and get them ahead of the game, really. But when the legislation comes in, there will be additional training available, and the legislation is sort of staggered, really. In the ones who are already accredited will have grandfather rights and will immediately move into the new system. The ones that need to go through the training will have a year to get there. But there is money available for that. It's been costed out according to what proportion of private sector housing every council has. It's not enough to employ a whole person, but I'm hopeful that working with other local authorities who are in the same position as us, that we can employ somebody and share them, and they will do the registering of the landlords. The registering needs to take place first, then the enforcement comes afterwards.
So are we going to be responsible for the enforcing of it as well, then?
Yes, yes.
Any questions? No.
I'll take the next question, Kim. We're still on page 34, and it's point 5.4, and it's how are the council going to become more efficient and effective if we are to continue meeting our current and future responsibilities? I know that's a huge question.
I think we do have to push forward on the collaborating with other authorities. We are a small authority, and we do have difficulty now in having people who have particularly the specialist knowledge and maintaining that specialism. If somebody leaves, they take that with them, and there's no backup. So we are hoping through collaboration to actually fill some of the gaps. I think that some of the bigger projects, there are benefits to be done by planning it once and then delivering across an area, which we do in health and safety to some extent now. Again, through the WOHEG system, we've got different expert panels set up for each of the subject areas, and they actually then, if we're going to do any enforcement work that we're all going to have to do, we develop it together. So we haven't got 22 local authorities developing a policy and a procedure on something. We have a joint team do it, and all 22 use it. So we are trying to look at things like that. But I think that we do need to have a certain scale to survive. And if we lose many more people, we'll be below that scale. So I think collaboration is the key way forward.
When we think of collaboration, we think we're going to lose people. But the way you've explained this now, we won't be losing any of our staff, because you cut to the bone now. And when you collaborate, one person could sort of do one particular aspect of it over a few authorities, and I can see the benefits in that. That's what you're thinking of in that particular way.
I think particularly for the very small service areas, collaboration is more about resilience, cover and providing the services effectively, because you only need to have the skills invested in 1 or 2 people instead of 4 or 5 of you all having to find those. There would be some savings though, just looking at a collaboration now with Blaenau Gwent with Trading Standards. I will be paying half of a manager's salary for Trading Standards for them to manage our section as well. So there is a saving of half a person, if you get my drift. So there will be some savings, but I think that most of them would be at the top end rather than at the delivery end.
If we can turn to 5.7, and it's in regarding the citizens' engagement. It says that citizens' engagement was undertaken in October-November 2014 to seek residents' views on which services were important to them and to consider where cuts in service could be made. Some form of citizens' engagement will be undertaken in respect of this year's budget proposals. And the question is, what changes have been made in the past as a result of citizens' engagement?
I think I described that with the dog control orders as the best example, really. We really did take the dog walkers and the people using playing fields and things like that, their views into play for that. And we did alter things based on what we had. I know sometimes people think we consult and it happens anyway, but it really did change the boundaries of where we set areas. So I think it was a very good model of consultation. And we did have a lot of responses as well. And
you will be doing a similar thing for this year?
If there was anything we were introducing which had that contentiousness to it, we would. At the moment, I can't think that there's anything coming in that is other than the housing bill which has been introduced nationally and is with a campaign to match it. So the Welsh Government is actually taking on the campaign for the housing bill being rolled out. But certainly if we were looking at this is a choice between do we do this service or that service, we would ask for people's views to rate them. The only thing is I do know what comes first, and it would be dog fouling and litter would be at the top of the list, which may not be where we would normally seek to put our priorities, but yes, we would seek for people's views.
I appreciate the fact that you've answered questions specifically on your report, but we've got a number of questions now which we'd like to ask, and it's in regarding the Welsh Audit Office as well. Thank you. Councillor.
The first question refers to page 64. And it's paragraph 27, is it? Analysis of Welsh Council's environmental health budget and staff. And the question is, why does Torfaen have the largest percentage change in staffing? And what are the main reasons?
I think if you read down below the table, the reason is actually there. We're such a small team, and the increase for Torfaen was was wholly taken up by having one unpaid trainee.
Right.
But it shows us a huge percentage because there's very few people. We do try to still, even though times are fairly tight, to support student environmental health officers during their training, their practical side of their training, and we had 2 on that year, so that's why it counted. Sorry. We've actually have faced less cuts than some other authorities, because about 4 years ago I came to council and asked for funding to employ 2 additional environmental health officers because we were understaffed. So I think because we were so poorly staffed before, the 2 additional ones put us at a level where we could actually cope. We didn't have to lose staff to come down to that. So that has helped.
Yeah, percentages can be very deceiving when you look at the actual numbers. Yeah, because you are a very small complement of staff, really, what you do. Shall I go on to the next one? The next one is page 66. And it's paragraph 34. Welsh Audit Office staff survey reported that only 35% of staff who responded felt that senior managers communicated their plans effectively to staff. This is lower than the Welsh average. Not much lower, but it is a little bit lower. How will you improve on this?
I think at the time we were actually in the middle of the voluntary redundancies, and someone had left and we hadn't properly accounted for all aspects of their role. So things would happen and then someone would say, oh, so-and-so used to do that. And it was the case of being maybe too far away from what they actually did to be fully aware of it. So I know one section were particularly affected by that. We have planned now, with the collaboration we're talking about with Blaenau Gwent, to have staff meetings for staff to be involved in actually working out how the service will work, will look, where they're going to sit even, sort of to make sure that staff feel properly engaged. I was very disappointed to find that we hadn't communicated properly. I think it's probably by one person, if you're talking of such a small section, but it's one person too many. And really, I'm disappointed that it's up as 30% anyway, and we'd obviously work to get that better.
The next question is also on page 66, paragraph 35. Within the report, you state that you always carry out consultations when major changes are introduced. In point 35 of the Welsh Audit report, they claim that they found a mixed picture of how informed residents feel about changes taking place. How will you improve on this aspect?
I'm not exactly surprised, because I took part last year in the corporate going out and asking residents what they felt about budget cuts, and there were very few people there. Very few people were aware of what the headline, we talk about them routinely in the council, that environmental health, this is grounds maintenance, this is whatever. We know what we mean by those headings. Members of the public don't always put things in those neat boxes, so they don't know what services they're talking about to start off with. And again, it comes back to, are we selling ourselves enough? I would say that the speed of response, which is the second part of that point, I was very pleased when I looked at it that we still are maintaining a first response within 3 days in over 90% of all the claims that come to us. So it is something that the officers do realise is important to people, that someone has got back to them, assessed their problem, and then prioritised where it's going to come. So that's a positive.
I know what you mean by the public misunderstanding or not. I think the council as a whole aren't very good at getting our messages across. That's throughout the council, not just... I can understand that, yeah. Yes, yeah. Shall I go on to the next one, please?
Any other questions?
No.
Any other questions? On to page 80 now. I think it's paragraph 10. How will you align the environmental health team with the national/local strategic priorities?
Part of the work to align the best practice standards that the audit was done on is already being undertaken by the WOEG group. Each of those expert panels underneath is looking at their own section of it and actually looking at where we can actually align more fully with these. So it'll mean we have reviewed the best practice standards about 4 times already, but we've almost accepted now it's almost an annual review because there's new legislation coming in that needs to be included. There are other things which may be dropping off the end. It may be a decision not to monitor pest control in the best practice standards because not enough authorities do pest control anymore, things like that. But they are reviewed, and the review this year is specifically to try and align with the national priorities and to actually make the point of where we do align with them. From our own point of view, I do have to say our local priorities will obviously be the first thing we discuss, but I think that most of the times if you look at what they are, there are huge overlaps with ours. Sometimes it's not very hard to see that one thing you're delivering for one is actually, it's fine for the others. What I would say, though, is our corporate plan has never fully reflected statutory services because there are things that you have to do, and when you look at how the corporate plan is set out, the council's aspirations and where they want the direction of travel to be, it's very difficult to fit food inspections, for example, into any of those boxes. There's nothing that says we're going to make sure food businesses are operating properly. So the statutory services have never really been totally in with the corporate priorities, so we do have to really think about the corporate priorities and what we can deliver under those. And again, the local ones, as in something's gone wrong locally and we deal with, we would always deal with those as a reactive service. So, okay.
Are our local priorities very similar to other authorities? And so I'm just wondering whether we have to fight more, if that's the right word, if you like, knowing that obviously our priorities might be slightly different to everyone else's.
I'm not aware of it across the whole piece, only across environmental health sort of services. And some have bigger headings that you can fit an awful lot more of your activities under because they're less specific. Others are, I would say, very aspirational, and it's very hard to fit any of the routine things you have to do under those headings and actually be able to measure a real input into making things better. So it's a mixed bag, I think. But I think that everybody whose function is mainly statutory services, apart from us and planning probably, are covered in the other headings. Things like social services, statutory, but they're almost in there as a whole chunk on their own. Same with education. We don't fit in that, and we're not important enough either. I think from a budgetary point of view, certainly. I would say we're one of the key services that lead into lots of things, but it's a difficult one. But I think that they're trying to address it this year, to have more of a focus on some of the things that you have to do, particularly if the decision's going to be which ones of these do you do less of and which ones are we not going to do at all. It becomes even more important then.
Thank you, Chair. The next question is page 82, and it's paragraph 19. The Welsh Audit Office states that performance nationally for health and safety is mixed, and the number of businesses requiring an inspection has fallen. Is this the case in Torfaen?
It depends what you're talking about, really. Food safety, we have still inspected 100% of all our high-risk premises.
Yeah.
We've managed to maintain that throughout all the bits of cuts, even when we've had outbreaks in the same year. We've maintained that. Yeah. Health and safety inspections have fallen, but it's partly because we've been directed not to inspect as many people by central government. When the current Conservative government came in, not the current one, sorry, the the coalition government came in, the minister who had the responsibility for health and safety enforcement said there was to be no inspection without a reason, and he wanted all the inspections cut by a third. That was just a diktat that they all had to be cut. Health and safety enforcement has gone away from routine inspections partly for that reason, and we now actually carry out interventions with different businesses which aims at an advice prevention role as well as maybe inspection, but not always including an inspection. We may hold an advisory day where we invite businesses along, and if businesses don't attend, they may be the ones who are targeted for inspection, but the ones who did aren't. So it's a different way of delivering it. So to say they've just fallen is strictly very true, but interventions have risen as well, so it's not as stark as the figures may show. But inspections have fallen. I know quite a bit about health and safety because I chair that group in the expert panels, but it's inspections at the baseline data that they had was from 2009-10, and local authorities were doing about 112,000 inspections in a year. Now we are currently doing 8,000. But the flip side of that is we probably only did 10,000 interventions. We are now doing 50 or 60,000 interventions. So it's not all been a downward. It's more the whole slant of the work has been changed because of the direction from above, really.
This is the last primary question you'll be placing here, and it relates to page 83 and section 22. In the report refers to the Public Health Bill and Housing Act. However, the Welsh Audit Office also refers to the Listening to You, Your Health Matters White Paper. What impact could this have on the council and service if delivered?
I think this is in there because of the timing of the report and the audit. The Listening to You, Your Health Matters has actually led to the Public Health Bill.
Okay.
This was the primary consultation on do we need a health bill and what would be in it if we did. So it's been enacted in the Public Health one.
Are there any other questions which members want to raise at this particular time? Okay.
I can't think of anything. I think Kim has been extremely comprehensive in explaining everything. But it's been a bit difficult because it's national as well as local. If you're just looking at Torfaen, it makes it easier. You know, you're reading something and you realise, oh, you know, this is a national thing and it might not be pertinent to Torfaen.
I would make a point that in the national report, there is actually a piece in there which says Torfaen is the only council that hasn't faced cuts in certain areas.
Yes.
Port Health is one that they bring up. And our budget for Port Health was zero before, and it's zero now. So we haven't had a cut, but you know. So it's the difficulty of doing a report which is covering and trying to be applied consistently across 22 authorities, and then picking out individual ones which have got their own characteristics. It is very difficult.
Could I thank you, if there's no questions from the members. Again, thank you for your time, and I know you're a very busy person, so what we'll do now is we'll consider the report, and hopefully we'll get some recommendations to you in due course. Thank you. Thank you, Kim. Thank you. Okay, the committee members, you have now had the opportunity to scrutinise and ask specific questions in regard to the scrutiny activity. I'd like to read again the scrutiny, the suggested scrutiny part, just to remind everyone. The Safer Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee are asked to note the key findings and recommendations of the Auditor General's report, review and scrutinise to what extent suitable arrangements are in place within the Council to address the recommendations made, make appropriate recommendations to the relevant executive member and or chief officer where arrangements need to be strengthened, if required, ensure appropriate arrangements within the committee work programme are put in place to monitor progress and address the recommendations that have been made. If we can look at the first bullet point, which is note the key findings and recommendations of the Audit General's report. Is everyone in agreement to actually note them? Show of hands? Thank you. That's number one.
Can I just interrupt there, Chair? I think Councillor Parish made it quite clear to Kim Pugh earlier that as a committee you found it quite difficult to assess because it was a national report. So I don't know, within your first recommendation, you want to say something along the lines of you note the report, however, you found it difficult to assess because it's a national report. We agreed?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, and I think we should point it out because it's much easier, how can I say, to look at one authority, but when the Welsh Audit Office has taken into account the whole of Wales, I mean, it's quite a different ballgame, isn't it?
Say, Chair, that I agree with what Norma said just now. We do a lot of good work, but we are very, very poor to let our customers understand, and I think that we should be trying to highlight it in whatever way we can, that the services we do run, they are first class, and the services are available. I think we should try to make that a little bit more common knowledge for people.
Maybe that can be done in regarding the citizens' engagement. I know a lot of the time, especially in the forthcoming year, will be possibility of approaching the citizens in regarding what cuts we're going to be possibly making, but that would be the ideal time to also strengthen, if you like, the good that the Torvine does as well, if you like. Okay. Regarding, was there anything that blatantly obvious came out of the report in regarding in the recommendations? Have we, as such, which? Okay, if we can go down each of the bullet points and then we can discuss them individually then. The second bullet point was to review and scrutinise to what extent suitable arrangements are in place within the Council to address the recommendations made. To review and scrutinise to what extent suitable arrangements are in place within the Council to address the recommendations made. I think Kim gave us a very good report, if you like, and she went into detail in regarding some parts of the service that they are currently providing, even though we've had an increase in some cases of staff, if you like. I'm reassured at the moment that the team, if you like, are doing everything possible. I think also the fact that that when it comes to the cuts, if you like, in the financial cuts, as yet we haven't had that much cuts to, if like, to the Public Protection Department as such. I don't know if other councillors are in agreement with that.
Yes, I'd agree with you. The action plan, if we say it does reflect the recommendations, you know.
Is it okay to interrupt, Chair?
Yeah.
Just to reflect on comments that we received from the WAO. I think one of the last questions the committee asked was, do you feel the action plan appropriately addresses the issues you identify within the report? And they responded by saying that they thought the action plan reflects the recommendation from the study, so they seem satisfied.
I think as part of the pre-agenda meeting, we had a debate, if you like, and we discussed the possibility of some recommendations. I don't know if you would like to go through them, Councillor Parish.
Yes, yeah. The first one is regarding to the citizen engagement campaign, which was carried out as part of the budget process last year. And I don't know whether my colleague would agree with me as well. Can we ask that appropriate executive member gives consideration to going out into the heart of the communities to get their views, not just the locations that were arranged last year. I don't think the borough was, how can I say, justly represented, you know, in these. And it is important that we get views from all the wards, really, if possible. I don't know whether my colleague would agree with me.
Yeah, I certainly do agree with you, Norma. I think all the things that we do right, we're the last people to highlight it, and I think we really should be doing that. Yeah.
So we can recommend that, Chair?
I would
Thank you.
say so, yes.
Thank you. Well, what about the one when the Welsh Audit Office recommends exploring adequate training for members? It's in 4.2 that comes up on the action plan, which specifically relates to members being able to consider what level of performance is appropriate and acceptable for Torfaen when delivering statutory functions.
Again, I'd agree with that recommendation number 2. I think also what came up was obviously the department is trialling, if you like, a new data gathering, if you like, program, and that seems to be the best way forward as such. I did take a note the fact that there were other authorities who were looking at it as well, and so as far as I'm concerned, would be a good recommendation to if like to basically pursue this, but alongside the costings of it as well, if you like.
When Kim mentioned sharing officers, especially high-ranking officers, you know, she said the cost would be, if it was 2 authorities, it would be halved straight away. I mean, they've been in discussions with that type of cost-cutting things, and I think that is a way forward. It's not the people on the ground, really, we need to be cutting. It's those above, and we can obviously share officers of that rank. That costs. Would that be a recommendation, you think?
Absolutely. I think we've got to endeavour to. I know it's hard, but to collaborate as much as possible. It's as simple as that, and I know that we're doing our best, if you like, and I believe that other authorities are taking a more cautious look in regarding collaborating, but I think we've got to do our best to collaborate with the right person or the right department of whatever authority who can deliver a similar service to ourselves.
Appropriate for us to talk about the corporate plan, the next one that's coming up, because Kim feels, and I mean we all feel like this, that the department as a whole is unseen. Do you know what I mean, by the public? And it's only when something goes wrong, it's sort of highlighted. Could it be taken into account? Ask the executive member.
When you said it's coming up.
A new corporate plan.
Oh, right.
Yes,
okay.
yeah, because we're coming to the end
yes,
now of corporate plan 2,
yes.
and we'll be looking at a new one. Do you think it's appropriate or not?
You could certainly ask the executive member to consider it, because I think what she said was, in the previous corporate plan, statutory services weren't represented.
Right.
So it may be that you want to ask the executive member to somehow consider this when determining in the corporate plan going forward, something like that.
I will agree with that. I don't have a problem with that. So,
Appropriate?
yes, appropriate.
I don't know what it is.
So, in regarding the number of recommendations, how many have we got now, Leanne?
7, I think.
I think the main one is the action plan does reflect what Wales Orbit, I think that's the main one. And I think that's what they're looking for, to see if they've got it right.
Totally. So can I have a show of hands in regarding taking the 7 action plans forward, recommendations forward? Thank you.
Chair, I'll obviously word those and send them out to the committee appropriately for agreement, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you. Okay, moving on to agenda item 8, date of the next meeting. If Leanne could take members through any future arrangements.
Yeah, of course. The date of the next formal SAFO Review and Scrutiny Committee is obviously to be confirmed. The committee will need to decide the next item to be scrutinised, which will be determined tomorrow at the visioning session, which takes place at 3 o'clock. This will be where the committee will look to set, agree and timetable their work programme going forward for the forthcoming year. So look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Thank you.
And with that, I hereby close the meeting. Thank you.